What is going on, everybody? My name is Mark and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel for the first time. If you clicked into this video, then today you will be watching me 3D print and process a sword that is respectively 5 feet in length from end to end. I am speaking of Ichigo's Bankai from the anime Bleach. Now, just like in all of my videos, in the description below I have annotated where the STLs for this model can be downloaded. And the best part about that, you may ask? The STLs are absolutely free. So happy printing, everyone. Also, speaking of free, the music that you're listening to is copyright and royalty free. So if you have your own Bleach related video that you're currently working on, or you simply want to download it just for listening purposes, I have provided the URLs from the YouTube channels that they originated from. Now, if I may, I'll go ahead and give those channels a quick shout out as shown on the screen. So if you get the opportunity, go ahead and pay those channels a visit and drop them a sub. Moving on, lately I've gotten into the habit of previewing my next video at the beginning of my last 3 videos that I've released. Well, here it is. Here's a sneak peek of what I'm currently working on. I've been paying close attention to the view counts, and most of my viewership comes from my Boba Fett helmet series. With that in mind, I'm beginning to focus on helmets a lot more than other props at the moment, and I'll be releasing a plethora of different helmet videos from this point forward. That's not to say that I'll stop making other props altogether, but the helmet is the centerpiece of a suit of armor, and it's the most recognizable item, and I simply want to make videos that my viewers want to see. So definitely stay tuned for a wave of really exciting content. So, as stated earlier, this model that I'm putting together is 5 feet in length from end to end, and it's broken up into several pieces. With that in mind, I wanted to ensure that it was assembled as securely as possible. One of the 3 methods by which I decided to do that was with a plastic welding gun. This is a tool that I saw a couple of weeks ago that is actually used for plastic car bumper cover repair. However, I figured that if it was used for holding together plastic seams in an automotive cosmetic setting, then the metal staples used on this tool should be robust enough to hold together a 3D printed model. Essentially, the way this tool works is that a metal staple is inserted into the end of the plastic welder. When the trigger of the plastic welder is pressed, an electric current runs through the staple, instantly heating up the staple, allowing it to easily melt into the plastic. Once the staple cools, the plastic should be hardened enough so the staple can be removed from the end of the plastic welder. Like I said earlier, plastic welding was only one out of the 3 methods by which I wanted to secure this model together. If anyone has seen any of my other videos, they would know that I am an avid user of Bob Smith Industries Quick Weld 5-minute Epoxy. This brand of 2-part epoxy seems to set up just a tad bit faster than any other brand that I've tried to use in the past. So that is method number 2 that I decided to go with. Of course, prior to applying 5-minute epoxy, I ensured that all of the adjoining ends of this model were scuffed with 80 grit sandpaper. In between adhering these sections together, I found it to be easiest to hold the adjoining sections together with clamps until the 5-minute epoxy had an adequate amount of time to set up. Even with the 2 previously mentioned adhesion methods in mind, this 3rd method is one that surely, positively gave me some peace of mind. For the entirety of the length of this model, I epoxied 1/8 inch steel rod through the pre-existing infill channels. By doing this, it provided internal support. One of my biggest fears with the blade being as long as it is was that the weight of the blade would cause a separation issue right at the guard/handle section of the sword. By establishing some form of internal bracing, I was able to effectively put that fear to rest. Unfortunately, there was really only enough room for 1 rod to be run throughout the length of the blade, but given the combination of options that I've exhausted thus far, it's at least safe to say that this model will not come apart that easily. Personally, I couldn't think of any other alternatives to hold this model together. But let me know in the comments section what you think. Was there a 4th method that I didn't know about that I could have tried? Or better yet, does anyone think that my combination of methods was overkill? Also, I haven't really seen anybody else use a plastic welding gun in this application yet, so definitely let me know what you think about that. So, moving forward, one of the things that you have to go back and clean up after plastic welding in the fashion that I did is the remaining staple ends that stick out of the plastic after their initial trim. To clean this up, I used a Dremel with a sanding bit to grind these down. If you do this, just be careful not to grind into the plastic if you can help it. Once the remaining staples were cleaned up, I followed up over the weld seams with 80 grit sandpaper and maybe just a little bit of fire just to try to smooth over the weld seams. It also helps if you allow a little bit of plastic dust created by sanding to seep into the seams before just ever so lightly going over them with a torch. After all of that rough sanding and lengthy assembly, we come upon our first primer coat. In this stage, the goal is to try to fill in some layer lines, but more importantly, this will help reveal a majority of cosmetic imperfections that may have been missed during initial sanding with 80 grit sandpaper. The specific brand and type of primer that I recommend using is Rustoleum 2-in-1 Sandable Filler Primer. Be sure not to mistake that for regular Rustoleum filler primer, as regular filler primer has a different texture when it dries and does not sand very well. At this point in the process, there is still plenty of sanding to be done. To fill in any revealed imperfections after spraying, there are plenty of different types of fillers, but like all of my videos to date, I used Bondo Glazing Spot Putty. It has a nice, loose consistency, it dries in roughly 30 minutes, and it sands away easily. Other than having the potential to be very messy and the color orange, I have no complaints. Of course, at this point, I encourage you to repeat the spray, putty, sand method until you have worked out all of the imperfections in your model to your standards. But if I may provide some technical advice, from this point forward, I find it best to use 320 grit sandpaper when trying to smooth out your prints. 320 grit sandpaper is just coarse enough to bite into the sandable filler primer and the spot putty, but not leave behind significant scratches. If any visible scratches are left behind, they're typically covered up by the next coat of paint, so no worries. Finally, we arrive at our first coat of actual paint. For this sword, Ichigo's Bankai is black, so I can imagine that in real life, the finish may look similar to a Teflon coated knife. With that in mind, I decided to go with a matte black finish, as this is the closest that I could probably get to replicating that look. Also, I shouldn't be saying this, but a potential upside to using a matte finish as opposed to using something glossier is that a matte finish is less revealing of possible imperfections in your model. But like I've said in some of my past videos, I won't pull my hair out over a few little nicks and dents in some of my projects. If anything, it gives it a little bit of character. For the hilt, ultimately it will be textured, but prior to that, I wanted to establish a base coat first. Underneath of the traditional Tsukamaki wrapping, the handle is red. Since my next coat of paint had to be sprayed on top of a black base coat, I went with something that was exceptionally vibrant, so I went with Krylon Gloss Banner Red. So, if anybody is wondering what kind of tape I'm using in this shot, the specific brand and product is called Gorilla Anti-Slip Tread Tape. Typically, the primary use for this product is used for providing durable traction to wet, slick, or high traffic areas in order to prevent slip and falls. Under normal circumstances, that would make this perfect for ladders, steps, ramps, boats, RVs, decks, etc. But just like I've done before in previous videos, I come to you presenting an opportunity for potential misuse of yet again another product. Honestly though, I did like the texture of the tape, and I feel like it ultimately added an extra layer of detail to this prop. Also, later on during the Tsukamaki wrapping, it prevented the Ito material from sliding around, providing some necessary traction. And just like the handle, the tread tape was coated with the same exact color of paint. So, truthfully, this is only the second time ever that I've attempted a Tsukamaki style wrapping. I honestly had to look up a tutorial, and I did my very best to get the diamonds in the center as symmetrical as possible. I know that practice makes perfect, but if anyone has any pointers, please let me know. Now we arrive at the part where we get to attach the chain of Tensa Zangetsu. Since this was made of PLA plastic, to open up a chain link, all I had to do was heat up a box cutter blade with a butane torch, and then the blade cut through the plastic like it was butter. I then heated up the chain link to make the plastic more malleable, and then I fed the chain link through the appropriate hole. To melt the chain link back together, I mainly used a soldering iron. However, I found that the butane torch at this point was still helpful, although I do recommend using the torch with caution as it is extremely easy to melt PLA. At this point, there was one final detail that I wanted to add to this prop in order to be able to call this project finished. I wanted the blade to appear to have a metallic edge. There are a few ways that I could have gone about doing this, but the easiest, most quick setting way was to apply a graphite rub. Out of all of the available options, graphite I think is the most convincing. To start prepping this area for graphite, first run pinstriping tape along the length of the blade, ensuring that the lines are perfectly even on both sides of the blade. This step may require a little bit of finagling to get it just right. Once this step has been completed, the rest of the blade will need to be masked off behind the line that you established for the blade edge. Since this had been painted fairly recently, I went with a painter's tape called frog tape. The type of painter's tape specified that it was for quote-unquote delicate surfaces, but admittedly, I did not have an issue with paint peeling when I pulled my tape, despite how recently that paint had been applied. This tape was a little bit pricier than the 3M brand that I typically buy, but given my results, it was well worth the investment. Lastly, I want to go ahead and cover applying the graphite powder. To apply graphite powder to the surface of the blade, any cotton-based product should be sufficient. In the past, I've used cotton balls, but this time around, I didn't have any laying around, so I used tissue instead, and I got the same exact result. Once the graphite powder is applied, you can simply pull your tape and call this project finished. And that wraps up this week's video. Don't forget to stay tuned for my next video where I make the Mandalorian's helmet, because I'm certain that you're not going to want to miss that. And as a bonus, I'll also be announcing the next 5 helmets that I'll be making. But as all good things must come to an end, if you truly liked this content, then go ahead and smash that like button like you own it, drop a sub to show me some love, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I publish new content. I hope you all will join me again for my next video, and as always, thanks for watching.